In this video, I'll be showcasing Developer Build 6 for FCEditor. This build features new level building overhauls and improvements. Support for color palettes have been added, and a few features for actor editing. For starts, the home screen has been reworked to be less bland and confusing. However, it's still a little empty, but this is not the final product. There are 3 options on the home screen: Open Level, Create Level, and Settings. Open Level is simply for viewing the level and editing it, and Create Level is to flatten the map data, making new levels easier to make. Clicking on either will bring up the File Explorer window to choose a mission file. Loading up into a level, there are 2 new edit modes that have replaced old ones. The first is Height Map Edit Mode, and the second is Tile Edit Mode. Starting with Height Map Edit Mode, this mode is for editing the height map and no longer a combination of tiles and heights. Selecting a section will now display all vertices instead of just a small chunk of them. Editing heights is mostly the same as before with a few new additions. First, a text box will display when dragging a vertex, which will show the height value. There is one tool in this mode, and that's a toggle for keeping heights on top of each other. If enabled, when moving a height, it will keep the next channel above the other. That way there aren't random vertices under the level. Moving on is Tile Edit Mode. This mode is a combination of the old Geometry Edit Mode and Geometry Add Mode. However, heights cannot be changed in this mode. Like with the old Geometry Edit Mode, we can click on a tile to select it. Also, like before, we have these 2 tools for changing the channel the tile is connected to. However, there is one new feature with Tile Edit Mode. When a tile is selected, we can change which channel the tile is connected to for each corner. For example, I have this quad tile that all the corners are connected to the first channel, but I need to have this edge connected to the second. All I would need to do is click and drag on a channel to move the corner to a new channel. This replaces the old method of scrolling over a channel. This also allows for much easier level modeling. Remember that there are only 110 types of tiles. If the overlay is red, that means it doesn't fall under them, and the level cannot be compiled. The last feature of this mode is a sub-mode. By default, if I hit 1, then I will change to Tile Add Mode. This is pretty much the exact same as Geometry Add Mode, however channels now preview when adding a tile. Hitting 1 again will move us back to the Tile Edit Mode. And that's about all the changes to editing the level. However, there are some other major changes to the backend of the editor. Before, saving a level would remove all tile animation and shaders, but this is no longer the case with this build. You can now edit levels and have all the visual effects still there. Before, the editor didn't support all 110 tile meshes, and many of them had incorrect orders. This caused textures to be misdisplayed. This is now no longer the case, and all tiles will now display properly. Moving on, there has been some new additions to Texture Edit Mode. On the PC version of Future Cop, the level stores 10 of these 256 by 256 bitmaps. These bitmaps are not compressed, and each pixel is stored in the texture. However, Future Cop has this mode where it uses a 256 color palette and refers to the bitmap on where to place these colors. If you run Future Cop on DirectX, then the game simply uses the bitmaps. But if you're running the game on software rendering, the game uses these color palettes. Some of you might have already ran into this issue with colors being displayed incorrectly. The editor now supports color palettes, which will allow textures to be displayed properly in software render mode. Switching to Texture Edit Mode and opening up the UV mapper, the Export and Import texture buttons now have 3 choices: Export or Import Bitmap, Export or Import Color Palette, and Export or Import CBMP. Export bitmap will only export the bitmap and not the color palette data. If you import a bitmap, the color palette data will not be updated. However, there is a workaround to this, but I'll get to that in a second. Export color palette will only export the color palette data and not the bitmap itself. Importing will only import the color palette data. Export CBMP will export both the bitmap and the color palette data. Importing will also do the same. This might be confusing, but here's how it would work. Let's say I want to grab a texture from another level and use it for the one that I'm making. I don't want to only export the bitmap because then the colors won't display properly because the color palette won't update when I import it. So I would select the Export CBMP button. Now on my level, all I need to do is import the CBMP and I'm all set. No need to worry about any color issues. But if I already have an existing level that I'm working on and I need to take a color palette from another texture, I can easily do that as well. This feature is probably very case scenario, but the option's there. And finally, let's say I have a custom texture that I'm working on. So I take textures from a bunch of other levels. I would need to export only the bitmaps, that way I can view them and edit them. But this also means I don't have a color palette anymore. If I import this custom textures, the colors will be wrong. This leads to the new feature in the UV mapper. On the bottom left of the UV mapper is a button to generate a new color palette, which is perfect because I have a custom texture which needs a new color palette. However, once I click on it, it brings up a warning. As of right now, I don't fully understand how Future Cop's palettes work, and at the time being, the method for making a new color palette is good enough. I recommend using existing color palettes, however for simple level textures, this works just fine. I'll click OK and there we go. My custom textures are now displaying correctly. Alright, well that's all for texture edit mode. The last new features of this update are in actor edit mode. All of these features are still very work in progress and this mode is still not usable yet, but there are a couple of changes that you can play around with. There's a new panel for editing values for actors. Only a handful of actors have things that you can edit, but there's some fun stuff like changing the player's health or which team a base turret attacks. And that wraps up everything in this update. Huge thanks to you guys for following the project, and a quick announcement is I've reopened my Patreon. Nothing too crazy, but any support would really help me out a lot. The next update you should see from the editor is tile animations and shader support, so look out for that and see you guys then.